she's the human being who's made holy. She represents the rest of humanity. Jesus shows us all. He's the one who can do it. He's the divine child who can show us our divinity and be redeemed and ascend to heaven. And then Mary is the symbol of all of us who then can follow and do the same.
Welcome to the In Her Image podcast, where we seek and celebrate Mother God through the scriptures, scholarship, the arts, and everyday life. This is your past hostess, Jessica Woodbury, and I am back visiting for a special Christmas episode with my dear, wonderful, good friend, Maxine Hanks. And I know as soon as you hear that, you're all going to be cheering because her past episodes this year were some of our most listened to episodes. So I know anywhere she goes, anytime she's speaking, everyone just comes running to hear because she has so much wisdom and goodness to share. And I'm so grateful that she was willing to come back on the podcast again and share with us a special seasonal Christmastide message. Welcome, Maxine.
Well, thank you, Jessica. Oh my gosh, what an introduction. I'll try to live up to that. We all just kind of bring forth what we, find and figure out. So I'll be sharing some information that I learned during my years outside of the church when I was a chaplain at Holy Cross Chapel, and I was celebrating devotionals and services for the Christian year. And I came across a number of holy days for the feminine, the divine feminine, and for Mary. And I began mapping and creating services for the Marian holy days. And I learned so much. And then I discovered other texts that I really liked that were apocryphal texts. So we'll be using an apocryphal text today about Mary and about her nativity and her birth and her mother, called the Genesis of Mary, or the Proto-Evangelion of James. So I'll be sharing things that I learned from my Christian and liturgical studies today.
Yes, which I'm so excited about. I think there's so much that we have to gain from and to learn from our brothers and sisters across the spectrum of Christianity and otherwise, even outside of Christianity. So we have some women's gatherings where we'll talk about different things and someone will share a message and we'll have deep discussions about them. And for the month of December, we had Maxine come and share a similar message to what she'll be sharing today. And we were really excited about it because Christmas is such a powerful time of the year where our mind is much more focused on spiritual things, hopefully. I mean, sometimes it's less for people, right? With all of the other things that are going on at Christmas time. But I love how she talked about, and we'll dive into this further in this discussion, how really, when you think about Christmas, obviously, we love to focus on Jesus, and Jesus is meant to be the center of the church, right? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or other Christian churches, he is the center. And yet, when you think about the holiday of Christmas, the person who is doing the acting really in this holiday is not necessarily the Christ child, because Jesus, what he's doing is being born, right? He is coming into the earth as an infant. Right. But the person who is doing the acting, the person who really, this whole Advent, who is the central character in this Advent, is Mary. And so I love how you brought in the story of Mary and focus on what can we learn from Mary during this time. So I'm really excited to dive more deeply in this with you.
Yeah.
You shared just now that you are going to be talking about some things that you pulled in from your time outside of the church and acting as a chaplain and such. When did you start really focusing more on Mary in the Christmas season, though? Was that something that you always naturally were drawn to? Or was there a time when that shifted more for you?
Kind of both. I always felt really drawn to Mary from the time I was a child. And I remember in one of our LDS, Christmas services, they picked me to play Mary in the manger scene, which I thought was really cool. I was really young. But what I did really was, after I left the church back in 1993, I went searching through early Christianity and looking for early Christian tradition and got involved in Gnostic Christianity. And at that time, 1996, I really got absorbed by Mary Magdalene and her journey and her role because I tend to see Easter, the Lenten and Easter season, as being about Jesus and Mary Magdalene. I think the season where Jesus is really central and it's about his work and his atonement is really Lent and Easter. Whereas I see Christmas, Advent and Christmas is really being about Mary. It's Mary's time. She's doing all the work. And the seasons involved around Advent and Christmas and Epiphany are really about her body and her role as a woman and her work as a woman who's bringing forth a child. So I kind of started with Mary Magdalene back in 1996. And then as I began studying Christian liturgy and serving in an old Catholic chapel that had been turned into an interfaith chapel, and I began doing services for the holy days, I began developing these special services for the Divine Feminine, the female holy days. And that's what turned me to Mary. That and the fact that the chapel I was serving in, Holy Cross Chapel at Salt Lake Regional Medical Center, that chapel was created by the Sisters of the Holy Cross, and they're a Marian order. And so their chapel had stained glass windows that are stunning and paintings. But the story depicted in that chapel was Mary's story. It was about her journey and her story from the Annunciation to the birth, the Nativity, to being there with Jesus at the cross, and then her Assumption when she is fully assumed into heaven. So the stained glass windows in the apse of the Holy Cross Chapel tell Mary's story rather than Jesus's story. He's actually this kind of, he's there in two of the pictures, but he's not central. And I found that amazing. It was one of those synchronicities in life when you know you're where you're supposed to be and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm not saying that it replaced the journey of Jesus. You know, Jesus is central to the atonement and salvation, but her story needs to be brought in also because they're really partners in that story. And so that chapel really depicted her story. So that's when I really got into her and her holy days and her pattern. Her story is there in the Christian year. I'll just say really quickly, the Christian year that the whole Christian world celebrates runs from Advent right now, the Advent season, all the way through Easter to the Ascension and Pentecost, and it ends at Pentecost in June. So it's half the year. But what I discovered was that Mary had major holy days that were mirror images to the major holy days for Jesus, and they were on the other side of the calendar between June, you know, Pentecost, and then December. And so it's really interesting. But also, both Jesus and Mary do this kind of dance throughout the course of the year, the Christian year. There are some Marian days, you know, in the winter and in March, and there are some Jesus days in the other side of the calendar. But I just saw this major pattern where they each had a redemption story and a role in the redemption of humanity, and that they were parallel mirror images. So that was interesting to discover that that other side of the calendar that hadn't really been seen or understood as the Marian journey kind of came to me. And so I mapped that and I developed services for it.
I wish that I could have been there for these services. I want to hear these services.
Well, you know, I wrote them all down. I've got them all down, and I did a bunch of Zoom programs on some of them. But I'm trying to get a workshop up where I'm sharing all that. I'm trying to get both a published version and then some workshop versions so I can share. It was like 15 years of work. I'd really like to share it. And so this is why I want to help people understand these holy days, the season, like the season of Advent, the season of Christmas, the season of Epiphany, because it's a way to enter into the story yourself. You can look at the holy days and kind of develop a personal practice yourself. So it's a way to go inward and kind of experience your inner spiritual life rather than just rushing around in your outer life all the time. And so I wanted to share, I think it's important to really understand Advent, the season we're in right now, and how that leads to Christmas and to Epiphany and to Candlemas. There's a huge season, really. 3 seasons come together at this time that are all based on this birth of this nativity, but also on Mary. It's really her time. And these 3 seasons are mapped and sort of organized around her and her role. And so it's the perfect time to jump in and share this and help people get into a frame of mind of looking at this Advent season and then Christmas season as a spiritual focus that they can use to enter into their own inner spiritual life.
Mm, which I think is so important for all of us. Like you were saying, it's so easy to get caught up in the outward world and in the outward efforts that we're doing and the ways that we're acting and moving and rushing around through the world, and
Yeah.
how important it can be to take the time to stop and go more inward and to meditate and be intentional. Take the time to intentionally evaluate and connect with the divine and figure out what we can be learning or how we can be growing personally within ourselves at this time. So Maxine created a presentation. And so I know that traditionally there's a lot of people who just listen to the podcast, and that is totally fine. We will try to describe. She has some wonderful artwork that she has gathered in this presentation, and she will briefly describe the slide before going on and discussing it. But if you are wondering how to access the video, we do have the video versions available on Spotify. So if you go to Spotify and go to the episode, there should be an option there to watch the video. Wonderful.
Okay. Well, this first slide, I call it Merry Christmastide, Mary being spelled Mary for Mary. But what I'm doing with this is a different reading of the Christmas season. We already know that it's about the birth of Christ, and we love and celebrate Christ. But what I want to do is add an additional 2 dimensions to that so that women, particularly, can, and everyone really who wants to go into a deeper, more personal, spiritual reading of the Christmas season, can consider these 2 additional aspects. I want to kind of center Mary in the Christmas season and do a reading that's a kind of a feminist theological reading about Mary and look at her as really the center of this season and think about that and what that symbolizes, what that tells us, what we as women can learn from that. And then I also want to talk about centering yourself in the Christmas season, putting yourself into it. What if Mary and what if the baby Jesus, on a deep spiritual or mystic level, what if they represent you? What if you can enter the Christmas story and see these figures as symbols to you about something that you're going to do this season? What are you going to give birth to? Is there a new part of yourself that is ready to come forward to be born? Is there a little baby inside of you, whether you're female or male, a spiritual baby, a part of your soul that is kicking and saying, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready to be born? There's a part of you that may be ready to come forth and in your life and in your psyche for this next year. And so Advent and Christmas is the perfect time for you to go inward and meditate and listen to your soul so that you can get a kind of a really personal Christmas gift out of it.
Yeah. I love that image.
Yeah.
That it's such a unique image of that part of ourselves that's kicking and wanting to be born and almost fighting against us, like our own selves, right? Like trying to come out of our own selves where maybe there's other parts of ourselves that is hesitant to let that be born for whatever reason, and yet there's a part of us that may be fighting the other, the other part of us that is holding us back and holding that baby from being born. But
yeah, how many times is there something deep inside of us that's trying to get our attention or trying to get out and we suppress it? So this is a way to use the holy days and the season to go deeper and think about maybe what Mary represents for you. How can you identify with her? And also the Christ child, the baby. How can you identify with that and use those 2 figures, those central figures, as an access point for you to go deep within yourself and bring forth something new for this coming year?
yeah. And I love just thinking about, the birth of the Christ child is the birth of greater divinity into the world too, and how we can give birth to greater measures of the divine in the world if we can learn to be a conduit for that. And thank
Exactly.
you for that beautiful imagery.
Yeah, for sure. And because this is the darkest time of year, there's a beautiful metaphor in that alone. This is when we celebrate the entrance of the Christ child into the world, that divine light comes in and enters at the darkest time. And that's an important metaphor for us in our lives, because quite often it's when we're going through the darkest time that we're compelled and forced to go deep within ourselves and bring forth more light and more inspiration and more relationship to God, because we need it. We need to bring forth more spiritual strength and more divine help and support at that darkest time.
And yet sometimes that darkest time feels so hopeless. And so it's wonderful
Hmm.
to remind ourselves that it is often from that greatest darkness that the greatest light is born.
It's born. That's right. When we need to go in, that's when we need to go deep into that innermost womb of ourself, our core self, our soul. If we think of our soul as kind of this womb deep inside of us, that's when we need to go into the womb and search and pray and ask for divine help to bring forth greater light and strength and connection to God. And so those are important personal spiritual ways to enter into the metaphors and the images and the story of Christmas. And this first picture that we've got up, for those who can't see it, I've got this picture of what looks like Mary and a Christ child, and then it looks like the Christ child is holding a doll, you know? But what that is, this picture, I love it. It's a picture of Anna, Mary's mother. And Anna is holding Mary, and Mary is holding the Christ child. And there are three people there. And I love it because it brings together the story of Mary's own mother and her birth, and then Mary and her bringing forth the Christ child, so that you see this three-generational picture.
Beautiful. Okay.
Okay, in this slide, I've got some candles, three candles, kind of again relating to that picture of three people, Anna, Mary, and Jesus, his grandma, mother, and child. In this one, I've got three candles, and it's a trinity of seasons. Because what we really have at Christmas, that unless you're a liturgist like me, you probably don't realize it, or unless you're really into all the seasons, you've got three seasons coming together. You've got Advent season, which runs this year from November 30th to December 24th. So Advent is 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas Eve. And that's the preparation season for Christmas. Then you've got the Christmas season, which is the 12 days of Christmas. And we all know that song, right? The 12 days of Christmas are December 25th through January 6th, which is Epiphany. And that 12 days is known as Christmas season. And then we've got Epiphany season, which begins January 6th and runs really all the way till Lent begins with Mardi Gras at the end of February, just before Ash Wednesday. But I tend to celebrate it from January 6th through February 2nd, because January 6th is Epiphany, and that starts Epiphany season. But for me, the highlight or the climax of Epiphany season is February 2nd, the return of new light, and it's known as Candlemas. And I'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah, I'm excited. These are terms and holy days that likely a lot of our listeners may not be familiar with. Some probably are, and others not as much. I know that I was not as familiar with some of these holy
Right.
days and some of these seasons. And so it'll be wonderful to learn more from Maxine, and not only about what takes place on these days and what they mean, but also how we can learn from them.
Yeah, and I should mention, this is where I should mention the number of days in each of these three seasons, again, evokes Mary and the female body that goes through menstruation and pregnancy and childbearing. Because Advent season every year is anywhere from 21 to 28 days. It's the 4 Sundays leading up till Christmas Eve. And so it varies. Sometimes it's 21 or 22 days, and sometimes it's 26, but it's 21 to 28 days, which is the length of a normal, that's the menstrual cycle length, which is really interesting. Um, and then Christmas is the 12 days of Christmas from December 25th to January 6th. That's her recovery time, where Mary has, you know, 2 weeks to recover from giving birth before she has to have visitors come. The three wise men are going to come on Epiphany, January 6th. And then Epiphany is 40 days, Epiphany season. And well, it's actually a little bit longer, but the 40 days that I count for Epiphany season are the 40 days that Mary has to wait after she gives birth to be purified in Jewish or Hebrew custom before she can go to the temple. So that's why she takes baby Jesus to the temple 40 days after she gives birth to him. And that's February 2nd, Candlemas, is the 40 days after December 25th. Because again, it's based on her body and the purification laws in ancient Israel that she couldn't go to the temple until she had had 40 days purification time. And so that you can count that 40 days from Christmas to February 2nd when we celebrate the day that she takes baby Jesus to the temple.
Yeah. So interesting to hear how some of these holy days we know about intimately, and others we've heard the stories, but we may not actually know that it is, that there's a particular day that is celebrated, some of these events. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about how all of that is based off of the feminine life. Like the days that we're celebrating, the time periods that we're celebrating are based off of these feminine cycles and the feminine ceremonies and rituals for Mary and other women at that time.
Yeah. And it's interesting too how holy days and seasons emerge in the Christian calendar over hundreds of years of time, and how they develop this pattern that seems to come out of the collective consciousness or even the collective unconscious, because some of this is direct and intentional. I mean, taking Jesus to the temple 40 days after she gives birth, that is definitely in history. That's a historical ancient Jewish purity law. Advent turning out to be 21 to 28 days every year, that's just like this weird synchronicity that matches up to, the usual female menstrual cycle. So some of it is just synchronicity and some of it is not. But I have to throw in one really wild historical thing since I'm a historian. And I can't resist. In Mormon history in Salt Lake, when the saints came to Salt Lake and settled out here, there actually was a purity law instituted for a while where women could not go to the temple. It's almost like the ancient Jewish purity law. They couldn't go to the temple if they were menstruating or if they had to wait a certain amount of time after they gave birth. That actually was in early Utah under Brigham Young for a while.
Yeah. So interesting.
One of those restoration things we probably didn't need.
Yeah, totally. There may be a number of those.
Yeah, right. Anyway, So we can go to the next slide here.
Okay.
In this slide, we have a picture of Mary and baby Jesus this time. And it's just talking about how, our focus on Mary. Let's focus on her. And this is her season, her time, and think about what that teaches us or tells us. And it's interesting, every year in November, right before Advent begins on November 21st, so right around Thanksgiving, right before Advent begins, usually the end of November, is a holy day on the calendar called the Presentation of the Virgin. And that's the day when Mary herself is presented to the temple by her mother. Her mother, Anna, takes Mary to the temple at age 3 to live with the priests and be raised by the priests. And this is in the story in the Genesis of Mary that we're going to be reading from, and I'm going to be sharing that. And so I like to think of Advent as really kind of beginning with November 21st, the Presentation of the Virgin at the temple, because this brings in Mary and her story to right before we start with Advent. Because, of course, what follows in the story of Mary after she's raised in the temple from age 3 to age 12, at age 12, she has to leave the temple because that's when her menstrual cycle begins. And the priests, they're saying in the Genesis of Mary in the story, they're saying, what are we going to do with her? she's 12. What are we going to do with her? Because we can't let this impure woman be in the temple. And so that's when she leaves, and then she's betrothed to Joseph, and then she has the Annunciation. The angel comes to her and tells her, "You're going to bear the Christ child." So it's interesting. I love the way that, however it happened over the course of time, human beings put this holy day, the presentation of the Virgin at the temple, on November 21st, right before Advent begins, and then Advent celebrates her pregnancy and her preparation to deliver the Christ child. And so what we see, in addition to three seasons that come together, the Advent season, the Christmas season, and the Epiphany season, we have a major holy day, one holy day within each of those three seasons. And I really like to focus on that because that's the day when you can pick for yourself, or you can pick a day next to it, like the day before or the day after, when you can focus and have a personal spiritual ritual or meditation or devotional to help you access the meaning of that holy season for you and for your life this year. And so in the three seasons of, for example, the Advent going into Christmas season, we have the Nativity, December 24th. And so that's and 25th, basically. That's the main holy day for Advent merging into Christmas. That's where Advent and Christmas meet, is Christmas Eve. And so Christmas Eve and Christmas Day are really, really important as personal spiritual holy days. January 6th is the culmination of Christmas season. That's where Christmas season meets Epiphany season, is January 6th. And then the main holy day in Epiphany season is February 2nd, Candlemas. And each one of those three holy days, the Nativity and the Epiphany and Candlemas, they each have a special meaning. The Nativity is when you give birth to something. Something is born. It comes into being. And Epiphany is when it is seen. It is witnessed. It is now someone besides you knows it. It's not your imagination. It's real. Somebody else has seen it. So that's when the wise men come and observe the Christ child on January 6th. So Epiphany is an aha moment, a manifestation, when something is seen. And then Candlemas, February 2nd, is when the baby Jesus is taken to the temple. And Anna and Simeon in the temple, they're these people who work in the temple. They see the baby Jesus. This is when Mary takes baby Jesus to the temple. And Jesus is not only seen by Anna and Simeon, he is experienced, he is felt. His presence is experienced by them, that this being is divine. This is the Savior. This is the Lord of Israel. So I like to mention those three holy days as a focus point for you going through these seasons of Advent meeting Christmas and Christmas meeting Epiphany, and then the Epiphany season. And what's interesting is that these holy days are climactic moments when the seasons meet. When Advent meets Christmas, that's Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And when Christmas meets Epiphany season, that's Epiphany. And then Candlemas is kind of at the height of Epiphany season before we head forward towards Lent. So think of those 3 days and write them down. It's a trinity of holy days and a trinity of holy seasons. And this is an opportunity for you to use these as a spiritual practice. So I
Yeah,
just wanted to throw that out.
totally. So one quick question, because some people might be like, where do all these dates come from? Right? Like presentation of Mary at the temple, or are like wondering, did these things really happen on these days? And does it matter? Right?
It's a great question, right? Yeah, it's a really good question. This is the Christian calendar, and I like to think of it as a map of the collective psyche, Christian psyche. These days developed over centuries. The very first holy days that were celebrated by early Christians was not Christmas. It was Easter and Epiphany. Those were the first 2 days. And Epiphany was associated not only with the day that the wise men come to visit and see Jesus, Epiphany was associated with the baptism of Jesus when John baptizes him. So early Christians, the first 2 holy days that they really celebrated were Easter, the resurrection of Jesus, and Epiphany, his baptism, and also the wise men visiting the baby. They also were focused on celebrating Sunday, the Eucharist. So every Sunday was a mini Easter. The Eucharist was a remembrance and a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ at Easter. And it was a way of centering and remembering Easter all year long, every Sunday. But these other holy days emerged over time. And as someone who I'm a liturgist, I'm a Christian liturgist, and I've studied the liturgical calendar for decades. And once you really study it and study the history of it, you realize that it's kind of amazing the way that these holy days come forward. They're based on oral tradition and Christian tradition. They may not be accurate at all. And they oftentimes they're celebrating a fantastical, miraculous aspect of the story. But I look at them as really powerful metaphors because there's a truth, inhabiting metaphor. And there's a spiritual truth, an archetypal truth, a symbolic truth. And so we look at these holy days as a map of a journey across the days and months of the year. And if you follow the whole Christian calendar, you find there's a journey mapped out there. And the Christian calendar maps the journey and work of Jesus from Advent in December to Pentecost in June. But if you're a feminist theologian, you can see that it also maps the journey of Mary from her birth in September and her bringing forth Christ in December and her own assumption back into heaven in August 15. So it's an archetypal map. It's a spiritual religious map of the journey of Jesus and the journey of Mary. And some of it is based on history or what scholars can determine is in history. A lot of it is just based on tradition and the stories and the symbols that come out of the Jesus story and the Mary story. And so it's more metaphorical than historical. It's more symbolic than literal. And again, that's why it's so useful to us to enter into the story and look at the holy days and enter into a holy day that is meaningful to you and create a personal devotional with candles for that day where you can take a day away from kids and shopping and family and rush and find a sacred private place or closet in your house downstairs in the far corner and create pick out a day where you can just celebrate that day for yourself as a meditation, a way to go inward into your soul and kind of ask your soul what it's trying to tell you.
I love that. I think it's so interesting. It's another tool, right? It's another tool that we can use to access both ourselves and the divine and entering that metaphor and having these maps that you're talking about that can draw us to more intentionally reflect and self-evaluate and connect ourselves more fully to the divine. It's ritual, right? Ritual is incredibly powerful in doing that. And so I love learning more about these new seasons and days that maybe we're not as familiar with, because I think they have so much to offer that we are not, that a lot of us, me for one, are not as aware of or haven't maybe taken the time to use as these tools of metaphor to further our own spiritual development and connection to the divine.
Exactly. It's a way that we merge with the Christian world, with other Christians in a common calendar and common holy days, things we have in common, an ecumenical kind of relationship. But also, it also recovers our own LDS origins because Joseph Smith was a liturgist. Joseph Smith really paid attention to the Christian year and the holy days. And when I was researching LDS history, really going deeper into that in the late 80s and working with Mike Quinn, what we discovered was that Joseph Smith he himself was planning and going to God in meditation and prayer and planning to seek answers to specific religious questions based on some of the Christian holy days and also on the solstices and the equinoxes. And so you have, and this is a whole other dimension of it, the way that the LDS tradition emerges out of Christian tradition and Hebrew tradition and out of the calendar. And so the LDS liturgical calendars or holy days, the crucial holy days in LDS origins have an overlap with the Christian calendar that I've researched and Mike Quinn researched. And it's fascinating. That's a whole other podcast I'll have to come back and talk about because it's mind blowing how the LDS holy days are really important events and important revelations that Joseph got matched and were based on the Christian calendar. For example, the first vision, we think that that was during Holy Week, and we think it was Good Friday. And the Kirtland Temple dedication, that's Easter. It's Holy Week. You know, everything that's happening in the Kirtland Temple that whole week is based on Holy Week activities out of the New Testament. And I mean, I can go on and on. That's another podcast. But I think it's important not only to understand Christian tradition, but to understand that really our own LDS tradition grew out of that. Joseph Smith understood that the Christian year and its holy days were sacred, and that each holy day was an access to the divine, where you can step out of time and enter into eternity. And that's when he was seeking revelation, and that's when he was planning major events in LDS origins, was to coincide with the Christian calendar.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Well, should we move
Next
along?
slide.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a quick slide. I love this picture of Mary and baby Jesus. I just wanted to mention here her name, Mary. It's really Miriam. In the Hebrew tradition, she was Miriam. And you have a lot of Miriams running around in the New Testament. You've got Miriam the mother and Miriam of Magdalene, and you've got a sister supposedly of Jesus who was a Miriam, and an aunt who was a Miriam. But they're based on the prophet Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron. She was a major role model for Hebrew women. And there were a lot of women who took her name to be connected to her and to her role in Hebrew history because she was huge. She and Moses and Aaron were the three prophets who led Israel. And so I love the fact that her name, Mary or Miriam, harkens back to the prophetess Miriam, which I think is really important. And so as we go through the rest of these slides, think about how you can maybe identify with Mary in some ways, and how you can also identify with the child, the divine child coming into the world. And just be thinking about that as we go through this.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you have here at the bottom of this slide. You wrote, Christmastide has 3 major holy days offering a personal path of spiritual formation for the soul.
Yeah.
So
that's it. That's it. It really does. If we're alive to it, if we enter it, it's there. Joseph Smith, who I really love and admire, and I know he's flawed. He's my 4th cousin, actually. But I love the fact that he was a liturgist, that he understood that the holy days and seasons were access points to the divine. So think about that too.
Yeah. All right. Next slide.
Yeah, this is the 4 candles of Advent season plus the Christmas candle. So we're in Advent right now. We just had the 2nd Sunday. We have 2 more Sundays of Advent. Our Advent Sundays this year are November 30th and December 7th and December 14th and December 21st. So you have 4 Sundays before we get to the big nativity, December 24th, where you can have an Advent wreath in your home with 4 Advent candles, and then the white Christmas candle is in the center. And each Sunday you light one of the next candles that belongs to that Sunday. And each Sunday has a theme. There's joy and peace and love and hope. And so each Sunday has a theme, and you can use that as a meditation for each of the 4 Sundays of Advent. And we can go to the next one.
All right.
Okay, this one is where we're going to read from the Genesis of Mary. And I'm going to let you read it, Jess, I think.
Give your voice a break.
Yeah, and this is Mary's own nativity story with her mother, Anna.
All right, so.
And this is Anna speaking. This is her voice speaking in the text.
I will pray with weeping unto the Lord my God that he visit me. And she put off her mourning garments, and cleansed or adorned her head, and put on her bridal garments, saying, God of our fathers, bless me. Who begat me? What womb brought me forth? Unto what am I likened? And behold, an angel of the Lord appeared, saying, Anna, Anna, The Lord hath hearkened unto thy prayer, and thou shalt conceive and bear, and thy seed shall be spoken of in the whole world. And Anna said, I will bring it for a gift unto the Lord my God, and it shall be ministering unto him all the days of its life. And Anna brought forth, saying, My soul is magnified this day. And the child became 3, and the priest received her, and the Lord put grace upon her. And Mary was in the temple of the Lord as a dove that is nurtured, and she received food from the hand of an angel.
Okay. So this text, you can see the parallels between Anna and Mary. And Anna, her preparation and becoming pregnant and delivering Mary. And then Mary's story of becoming pregnant and delivering Jesus. There's a strong parallel here. And I love how Anna is basically saying that she's saying, Who begat me? Who am I? What womb brought me forth? Unto what am I likened? She's trying to ask, Who am I? And what is my role? And her role is to bring forth this child, Mary. And and then she's told that Mary will be a gift. She will bless, the nation of Israel. And that the whole world will know who she is. So here's this mother who's not only going to have a child, but she's told this child is going to bless the whole world, and the whole world will know her. And Anna she's overwhelmed, and she's saying, oh, okay, well then this is a sacred child. I'm going to bring the child to you, to the temple, and give it to you, because this is a really big deal, And
Yeah.
so she does. She takes Mary to the temple when she's 3 to give her to the priest. And again, this story, the Genesis of Mary, or Proto-Evangelion of James, the Proto-Gospel of James, it's an apocryphal text written in the 2nd century, and you can find it online. And all of the apocryphal texts, and even texts in the New Testament, even canonical texts, they tend to contain both oral tradition of things that actually probably did happen and are retained in oral tradition and carried down, along with miraculous, magical things in the story. And so you'll find in the apocryphal text and even in the New Testament a combination, and this is what scholars look at. They look at, okay, what are we seeing here in the oral tradition that we can trace back and does seem somewhat historical? And then what elements in the story are more fantastical, they're more mythic, they're more, epic testimonies. And so you see both in this story. If you read the Genesis of Mary, you'll see fantastical elements, and you'll see parts of the story that make you stop and think, wow, this is amazing. There's a powerful spiritual story here. And some of this may be true. It may have been preserved. So think about that when you read it.
Yeah.
And
And
this
regardless, I think, like you were saying, still, we can't know exactly what really happened or what did not.
Right.
But there is so much that you can learn from the symbol, from the story, from the metaphor. And I know we'll keep talking some more about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, how many of us, that's what I love about it. I can identify with Anna asking God, who am I? What womb gave me birth? Because I personally, Maxine, I couldn't have children. I had terrible endometriosis that destroyed my female organs. I had like 2 surgeries and continuing problems. I could never have children. And there are certain lines in these stories that just grab hold of my heart and my gut, and just make me cry. Because when I read her, and there's much more, this is just a quick clip from this, apocryphal text. It's much longer, but her words just echo in me and just pull me. What womb gave me birth?
Beautiful.
Yeah. And in this next slide, we have this beautiful little painting of the child Mary. She's 3 years old, and she's in the temple, and there's this ray of light coming down on her head, and she's surrounded by angels. Because in the Genesis of Mary, it says that, and this is one of the more, fantastical, miraculous aspects of the story, but it says that her mother takes her to the temple to live in the temple and be raised by the priests at age 3, and she's fed by the angels. And this painting shows her being attended to by both the priests and the angels in the temple.
Beautiful.
I think it's beautiful. This next slide, okay, what I want to do here, there are 4 aspects of Mary, her role and her life, that I want to mention. I want us to think about Mary not only as the mother, we always think of her as the mother. And so we'll be talking about that. I have a slide for that. But I want to think of Mary as a priestess. And I want to think of Mary as a prophetess. And I also want to think of Mary as a queen. And so I'll talk about why I want us to think about her in these other roles, because she's much more than just the mother. And the mother role is really, really important and sacred. But we want to think about her as a priestess also, because she grows up in the temple. She grows up learning from the priests, and she's raised by the priests in the temple, and that makes her a priestess. Her role is to weave the veils in the temple, and she's there from age 3 to 12. And there's a strong parallel with baby Jesus, because guess what? Mary, her mother takes her to the temple when she's 3. Well, Mary takes baby Jesus to the temple when he's 40 days old. And then Mary leaves the temple at age 12, and baby Jesus will go to the temple at age 12 and astonish the priests.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very strong parallel there.
Shall we go on to the next one?
Yeah. Okay, this next screen is Mary as prophetess. Why is she a prophetess? Why is she in the role of a prophet? Well, because angels come to her. And when she's 12, she has to leave the temple. The priests get together and say, what are we going to do with her? She's 12. We can't let an impure woman live in the temple, because that meant that at 12 she was going to start menstruating. She has to leave the temple, but that's right at the time the angel comes to her and in the Annunciation and lets her know that she's going to be the mother of the Savior, the Messiah, the Lord. And a prophet is someone who, God talks to, and angels come and attend and give messages to. And so she's really in a prophetic role here, because she's visited by the angel Gabriel and by other angels in the temple. And she receives a divine calling from God through the angel. And she's chosen by God to be the mother of the Lord. And this is a new revelation from God for all of humanity that's given to Mary, that is a message to the world. And
Right.
it directly relates to the restoration of Israel and the salvation of humanity. So this puts her in the role of a prophet. She's a prophetess.
Yep. And she's the first, or one of the first, to be given this inspiration, this witness that Jesus will be born, that Christ will come to the earth. And
Yeah.
What a heavy mantle
Yeah.
she had as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really think it's important to bring out these other aspects of her role. We've overlooked her role. We've just focused on her as the mother, which centers Christ in the baby Jesus, actually, in Christmas. And it overlooks all of these dimensions of her role, her identity, her destiny, her role in the salvation of humankind. And frankly, baby Jesus doesn't do anything at Christmas. Baby Jesus is just born and cries, and then starts eating on his mother's breast. I mean, baby Jesus doesn't do anything. Mary does all of it. And it's her calling from God and her role and her life growing up in the temple. And it's her.
Her being visited by angels. And
yeah. She's at the center of all of this. She's doing all of it. And the entire holy season and Christmas is entirely based on her calling, her role, her performance, her life, her willingness to live at the temple with the priests instead of with her mom, and her willingness to answer that call to bear the Christ child, even though she's a virgin. And all of this, it's her doing, and God's, but
yeah.
So this next slide, we will read some more from the Genesis of Mary. This is the Annunciation, and this is how when she's 12, she has to leave the temple, and this is what transpires. Do you want to go ahead and read it, Jessica?
Sure. When she was 12 years old, there was a council of the priests, saying, Behold, Mary is become 12 years old in the temple of the Lord. What then shall we do with her? And the high priest went in unto the Holy of Holies and prayed concerning her. There was a council of the priests, and they said, Let us make a veil for the temple of the Lord. And the lot of the true purple and the scarlet fell on to Mary. And she took them and went unto her house. Mary took the scarlet and began to spin it. And she made the purple and the scarlet and brought them unto the priest. Bless me. This is very reminiscent of her own mother, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mary was afraid and departed unto her house and hid herself from the children of Israel. And lo, a voice came, saying, Hail, thou that art highly favored. Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found grace before the Lord of all things, and thou shalt conceive of his word. And that holy thing which shall be born of thee shall be called the Son of the Highest.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, I love how Mary in this text is saying, "Who am I? Like, why me?" And it is very parallel to her mother saying kind of the same thing. And I also love the image of her weaving. She's weaving, one of her jobs in the temple is weaving the veils and making the veils of the temple. And when she has to leave because she turns 12 and the priests want her to leave, there's more about that in the text. I didn't include all of that in this reading. Then they give her the most precious purple and scarlet threads to make the most, what's considered the most sacred, holy, the most precious veil. So she takes that to her home and she's weaving that. And that's when the angel Gabriel comes to her and says, you found favor with God and you're going to bear the Christ child. So I love this story because I think one of the ways that we can enter it is to think about the times in our life when we've been faced with a challenge or a call or something that feels like we're either destined to do it or called to do it, or it's just unavoidable. It's kind of, right on our path and there's no avoiding it. And it feels overwhelming. It feels like there's no way I can do this. This is an overwhelming task that's facing me. And I like to think of her and her story whenever I think of those times in my life. And and I think that's one way to enter into her story because she's overwhelmed. She's 12, and
Oh my
she's
goodness, so
like,
crazy to
who
think
am
about.
I?
I have a
Yeah,
13-year-old and an 11-year-old, both daughters, and it is crazy to think about,
yeah,
all this whole story, right? Her being raised in the temple away from her parents. And
yeah,
then my daughters, going through that age where they are embarking upon womanhood, their bodies are changing with menstruation and things like that. And
yeah,
that is why she couldn't be in the temple anymore, right? Because
right,
the women were not supposed to be at the temple within a certain amount of time of their
yeah,
menstruation. But then to think about her seeing angels at this time and really become stepping into her role as a prophetess
right,
at that age, and then stepping into her role as mother too around that age is
right.
just, it's so overwhelming and crazy to think about this 12-year-old
Yeah,
girl.
it really is. And, of course, we don't know. We don't know what really happened. We don't know at what age the angel appeared to her and if it was really at 12. And we don't know at what age she had Jesus. I mean, the tradition is that she was around 13 or 14, when she had Jesus. But I think what's really interesting is that even though we don't know any of even the visit of Gabriel and the call to bear the Christ child, it's all based on her menstruation when she's going to start menstruating. I mean, the tradition, the story is based on her body, the female body. And we don't think about that very much or talk about that. But this whole story is based on, oh my gosh, this girl is going to start menstruating, which means that she could get pregnant, which means that, okay, now's the time for her to be betrothed and have this child. And we don't know. It could have been 2 years later. It could have been, but I think the tradition is that she was 14, but still, that's really young.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, next one. Next one. This next slide is Mary as mother figure. And this is how we always think of her. But I love this picture. It looks like it's Mary and the Christ child, but it's actually Anna and Mary. And it shows that Anna is holding a holy book and baby Mary is looking at the holy book,
Yeah.
suggesting that they're foreordained to fill these roles. These are divine roles.
Yeah, and it's almost like learning and teaching and this intentional study of scripture, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's important, I think, to think about Advent right now that we're in. And the next slide, we're going to go to, I think, to Christmas, but the Nativity. But Advent is a time pregnant with possibility. It's a time of pregnancy and preparation when you're preparing to bring forth, give birth to something new. It's a time when you can retreat into the deep innermost womb of possibility within yourself. And it's also, in addition to being this time of pregnancy and retreating into the womb of your soul to see and feel what is wanting to be born at Christmas, it's also a time of shadow work. It's a time of releasing whatever has been blocking this part of yourself, this birth that is wanting to come forth. Something has probably been blocking it. It's a preparation time, just like Lent before Easter, when you go into the darkness and the womb within and into your own shadow and ask, because you're going into this inner womb to ask what wants to be born, what is ready to come forth in me at Christmas. But you're also going into your shadow and asking, okay, what has been blocking this? Because it's important to release whatever has been blocking what is ready to come forward, because oftentimes there's something blocking it. So I like to think about both of those as spiritual practices.
Yeah, I love that. It actually makes me think about in my second birth. My first birth was very, very intense and very, very long, 30 whatever hours, and just really abnormally intense. And so before my second birth, we had moved to a different place and we had not felt good about the hospital that was there. They had about a third of the babies going into the NICU there. And we're like, okay, something's going on here. And we ended up feeling called to do a home birth. But at the same time, I was very scared about that because of what I had experienced with my first birth. And so I had to go through that work and take the time to really sit with my feelings about it and to sit with God and say, okay, God, I feel like you've asked me to do this, but I'm kind of nervous about that. And I'm a little bit scared about it because of these other things. And I had to do this work of looking at that shadow and of communing with God to address it and figure out how to move forward. And I love thinking about right now, how can I do that? What is it that I am facing right now? What is my current shadow that I'm afraid of that maybe is blocking what God is asking me to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's the case. I think I find that in my life. Every time that I'm kind of in pain and struggling and feeling like I don't like the way things are going, and I have to release something, give up something, and then that creates room for something new to come in. And it just seems to always happen. And so I think it makes sense that there's an Advent period before the birth, the Nativity, and there's a Lenten period before Easter,
Mm,
because they're parallel. Advent is the mini Lent and Christmas is the mini Easter, because you have to have that preparation time and shadow work and releasing before you can bring forth this new life.
mm.
Okay, next. Okay, now we're at the Nativity. And at the Nativity, it's December 24th and 20th. It's the birth, to be, to become.
All right.
This is the Nativity of Jesus within the apocryphal Gospel about Mary.
And they drew near unto Bethlehem within 3 miles, and he found a cave there, and brought her into it. And he went forth and sought for a midwife of the Hebrews in the country of Bethlehem. And behold, a woman coming down from the hill country, and she said, Who is she that bringeth forth in the cave? And they stood in the place of the cave, and behold, a bright cloud overshadowing the cave. And the midwife said, My soul is magnified this day, because mine eyes have seen marvelous things. For salvation is born unto Israel. And immediately the cloud withdrew itself out of the cave, and a great light appeared in the cave, so that our eyes could not endure it. And by little and little that light withdrew itself, until the young child appeared, and it went and took the breast of its mother Mary. And the midwife cried aloud and said, Great unto me today is this day, in that I have seen this new sight.
Thank you. So I love the imagery of they go to a cave. It's not a manger. They go to a cave, which makes a lot of sense in this story. and the midwife, there's a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, there's going to be a midwife. Does everybody think that Joseph really delivered that baby?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of those things in the oral tradition that I think, okay, there's something real here. This preserved something real, that there was a midwife. And then I love the parallels between the midwife and Mary herself. They're both kind of expressing the Magnificat, that, my soul is magnified by this. I'm changed, has, just like what Mary says when the angel appears to her and told her she's going to bear a divine child. The soul of Mary and the soul of her midwife are both expanded and enlarged and magnified by this experience,
Yeah.
which is a really interesting idea, and it's really important as a spiritual practice. I don't know how you or how many of your listeners have had that experience, but I'm sure we've all had it. When we have this spiritual experience with something that feels otherworldly and divine, and we feel changed by it, we feel like our soul has been expanded or magnified by that experience. I had that experience the night my father died, and he died at the Christmas solstice, December
Mm.
solstice. Like, my father died on the night of the darkest night of the year,
Wow.
and I sat up with him as he died. And I felt the presence of divine beings there that came to get him.
Mm.
And I can tell you, it's like my own personal, like, solstice Christmas story. I was changed by that experience. It changed my soul. They magnified my soul. I felt like their light, this light that I felt in the room of these divine beings who came to get my dad to take his soul safely, their light was so intense and so, I can't even describe it. It affected my soul. It magnified my soul. And that's what I think of when I read this. That if you have an encounter with the divine, it magnifies your soul. It enlarges, it inflames and enlarges your own spirit.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so beautiful. And I do feel like those moments of passing into and out of this life are so sacred. They're moments that are so incredibly holy. And how beautiful for you to have that gift on the darkest night and in a time that feels so dark, to also have in that darkness such bright, life-changing light given as a gift as well.
Thank you. Your description is perfect. It was life changing because I was a liturgist, and here I am on the solstice, the darkest night of the year. And it's the darkest time to lose my father. He was my best friend. And then to experience divine light. I had an understanding of Christmas beyond anything I had ever experienced.
Hmm.
The real
Well,
meaning of it.
and I love this story that you bring in from these agnostic texts, because I think about all the nativities around my house right now. I have a lot of nativities. My mother collected nativities when we were growing up, and she had like literally hundreds of nativities. And we had a whole section of the garage dedicated to the storage for nativities. I just think about, oh, how I wish that these nativities that we have, that have shepherds and wise men, all these men
Yeah.
would have these midwives, these female witnesses
Yes.
that were there. And I love, I actually have a copy of Brian Krishiznik's painting, nativity
Yeah.
painting. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it, but I just love
Yeah.
that painting, because there Mary is, and she's sweaty, and she's, just wet and exhausted, and she's holding the baby, and the baby is nursing at her breast, and there's these two midwives that are right at her side, and they've got a bloody rag, and they're just looking at her and cooing over the baby, it seems. And then there's Joseph, who's just like palm to the face, like, what? It's just happened. But these women who were, who are there and know and understand the bringing forth of life, and that I'm sure were there supporting her through that
Mhm.
transition and that birth. And
Mhm.
then we're witnesses to this miracle and this beautiful, important, pivotal moment in
Mhm.
history. And I love this witness, that this midwife knew that she was given witness to how powerful and important this moment was as well.
Yeah, she's like the first witness before the wise men. Okay, next slide. Okay, Epiphany. So we've talked about the first major holy day where Advent meets Christmas, and that's the Nativity. This is the second major holy day. So one of the things I love about the full Christmas seasons, all three, with Christmas and Epiphany season, is that Christmas isn't over after, Christmas Day. I was born on December 26th, and I used to joke that it was the most depressing day of the year. It was when everybody took their presents back to the store and everybody was bored, and it was a lousy day to have a birthday, But actually, it really focused me on Christianity and religion. I think it destined me to be a liturgist. But it's not over. I love the fact I keep up my Christmas decorations until February 2nd for the whole season. So you have two more holy days and you've got two more seasons. You've got Epiphany, you've got Christmas season, which runs from Christmas Day now to January 6th, the 12 days of Christmas. So that's what the 12 days of Christmas are. People think the 12 days of Christmas are 12 days leading up to Christmas that are happening in Advent, but they're
Yeah.
not. The 12 days of Christmas are Christmas Day to January 6th. And this comes out of European tradition. This goes clear back to the medieval period that they would celebrate the 12 days of Christmas. So Christmas lasts till January 6th. You can keep your tree up. You can have another day for presents. If your birthday is Christmas Day, celebrate it on January 6th instead, you know. And so Epiphany is January 6th. And so what has been born on December 24th is now going to be witnessed and seen. It's going to be seen. It's going to manifest so that others can see it. This is from the Genesis of Mary, and this is the story of the wise men coming to visit Jesus.
And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them until they entered into the cave, and it stood over the head of the cave. And the wise men saw the young child with Mary his mother, and they brought out of their gifts gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned by the angel that they should not enter into Judea, they went into their own country by another way.
Okay, and what I love about this story, and also the one we read previously about the birth, when the midwife is there and the birth happens, is that you have a divine cloud that comes to the cave. I love that. I forgot to mention that in the birth story, there's this cloud of God's presence or divinity that comes into the cave. And all of a sudden, this child appears. This child is born while the cloud overshadows the cave. And in this account, when the wise men come, again, there's this cloud there. And also the way they describe the star as overpowering all the other stars so that you can even see them. But I think it's a really interesting account. And I love the image of kind of a cloud, a divine cloud coming in and overshadowing people when the divine presence is there, because you see that in a number of Gnostic texts and Gospels. And by the way, I should mention this text is apocryphal. The Genesis of Mary, it's not really a Gnostic text, although it has a few Gnostic elements. But it's not really known as a Gnostic Christian. It's an apocryphal Christian text. But one thing it has in common with Gnostic text is the cloud. And the cloud shows up in the medieval mystics. I mean, with Hildegard and with Gillian of Norwich and these female mystics, there's this text called the Cloud of Unknowing. And I love how this image of the cloud that's the divine presence shows up in ancient texts and also medieval mystic texts. So I thought I'd point that out.
So interesting.
Yeah. So next slide is now we're at the third holy day in the third season. We're in Epiphany season. The climax of Epiphany season is Candlemas, February 2nd. So this is your third chance to celebrate Christmas before you have to move on with your boring year. It's your third chance to give each other presents and go back to the store and get the thing you really wanted by exchanging the thing that somebody gave you. So you can, this is the third day, the major holy day of the Christmas season. And this is the day that is 40 days after the birth. So this is the day when Mary takes baby Jesus to the temple because she is now purified from having given birth. She's waited 40 days and she takes baby Jesus to the temple. I love these three holy days of Nativity and Epiphany and Candlemas because they suggest a progression, a spiritual process of being and then seeing and then feeling. when she takes the baby Jesus to the temple, the divine child is experienced by his presence, his divine being. And so Anna and Simeon, who are there in the temple, they not only see the child, they experience him. They experience his presence, his divine presence. And so they have a spiritual experience. And so it represents this third dimension of like being, that there's just being, and then there's seeing or witnessing, and then there's experiencing. And that offers a really interesting spiritual process, I think, a spiritual practice. So if we go to this next slide, what we'll read, this is actually from the New Testament. It comes from Luke. And again, I've got the picture here of Anna and Mary, because even though we don't know if it's the same Anna, and it may not be, I love the idea. I love the synchronicity that the prophetess, the woman who's this temple worker and prophetess in the temple, when Mary takes her baby to the temple to be blessed by the priest, it's Anna, this woman, aged Anna, who is a prophetess in the temple. She's the one who sees him. And I love the idea of thinking that it's Anna, Mary's mother, so that it could be Jesus's grandmother.
Yeah. And
At
obviously
least
the temple was very important to them. I mean, she stays in the temple worshiping night and day. And the same potentially, the type of person who may take their child and have her raised within the temple.
Exactly. It's like the third part of the story, because in the Anna and Mary story, Anna takes Mary to the temple as a child to be raised, and then Mary gives birth, and then she takes her child to the temple, and then here's this aged prophetess Anna in the temple, who is the witness of the child. And so it brings that whole story full circle. That I think is amazing, even if it's just metaphorical, even if it's not the same Anna, because there are some differences in the description of her, I still think it preserves an oral tradition. I think there's a truth in there that the grandmother of Jesus, Mary's mother, could have been a prophetess, a temple worker in the temple at that point. Anyway, go ahead and read this.
Prophetess Anna was very old. She never left the temple, but worshipped night and day, fasting and praying. She gave thanks to God and spoke about the child to all who were looking forward to the redemption of Jerusalem.
Yeah. In the story, which is a little longer in the New Testament, just talks about how she was very aged and she had been widowed for many years. And even though the description of her husband and kind of the ages don't quite match, I think she's given a different husband in this story, whereas in the Genesis of Mary, it's Joachim is her husband, Anna's husband. But I still like the idea of this being Jesus's grandmother, who is the witness of him in the temple.
Yeah.
And so we burn candles on Candlemas to remember the presence, to feel the presence of the divine, by burning candles on February 2nd.
I love that. I'm going to have to add that to my calendar.
Yeah, definitely. And there's that parallel there on this slide. Mary takes baby Jesus to the temple, just as Anna had taken baby Mary. And next slide is, okay, our last aspect of thinking about Mary is Mary as queen. And so we tend to see her as the queen of heaven in kind of Catholic and some aspects of traditional Christianity. But I like to think of her as the queen in a couple of other ways, because she's the mother of the king, the king who comes forward, the true king of Israel. She is of the royal line of David. And this is how Jesus has access to the royal line. This is why he's of the royal line of David and why he is seen as the true king, because his mother is of the royal line of David. And she's also a partner with Christ in this whole journey of redemption. And there are ways in which she's kind of a co-redeemer, because she's so deeply involved in helping him to fulfill his role. And then in the Christian year, in the calendar, after he ascends and goes to heaven and sends the Holy Spirit to ignite humanity and all of the believers, she plays a role then that she helps the whole church to be redeemed. And she is assumed bodily into heaven in August. She's the human being who's divinized and made holy, and she ascends just like Christ did bodily into heaven. She represents the rest of humanity. Jesus shows us all. He's the one who can do it. He's the divine child who can show us our divinity and be redeemed and ascend to heaven. And then Mary is the symbol of all of us who then can follow and do the same. And I love the way that LDS tradition and LDS origins really picked up on this, that we are divine and we too are like God. We too can ascend. If you look at Joseph Smith's King Follett sermon at the end of his life, it's all about this. It's about apotheosis. It's about our divinity. We are divine. We're not just these lower creations of God. We are co-eternal, co-equal. We come out of the same original substance that God came from, the light, intelligence, and truth. So we are divine and we can ascend. And in that sermon, Joseph Smith says, if you know God, you'll know yourself. And if you know yourself, you'll know God. And that is the ascent. And that's what Mary represents. She represents the divinized, ascended human being. And the idea in August when she ascends is that she kind of paves the way for us to know that we too can go. We too can ascend. And she kind of takes us with her as kind of a mother figure. And so it's interesting in LDS tradition when we think of the Queen of Heaven, and we did use that term early in LDS origins, the Queen of Heaven was used a lot by a few different leaders, W. Phelps and others. They were talking about the mother in heaven, that the mother in heaven was the Queen of Heaven. And what's really interesting is that in Catholic tradition, Mary is seen as the one who becomes the Queen of Heaven. She ascends and takes her place there. So this painting that I have here, it's from a church that's in Italy. It's a very early Christian I think it's a mosaic rather than the painting, but I love this depiction. It shows Mary and Jesus together on the throne in heaven, where she has taken her place as the Queen of Heaven. So whether you look at Mary as the Queen of Heaven, or whether you look at the Heavenly Mother in Mormon tradition as the Queen of Heaven, they're both expressions or aspects of the Queen of Heaven and who she might be. So I really love that.
Beautiful. And such a beautiful mosaic.
Yeah, it is. It's so beautiful. So we're getting at the end here, and what I'm suggesting, this is actually a depiction of Sophia, and Sophia is the higher divine dimension of the divine feminine. And there's a way in which Mary is associated with Sophia, Mary as a human embodiment or lower earthly mortal version of Sophia, whereas Sophia is the higher spiritual eternal aspect. And also Mary Magdalene is seen as an embodiment of the Sophia. And in Gnostic Christian tradition, it is basically said that we all have this aspect of the Sophia in us, that all of us are an expression or embodiment of the Sophia. And in Gnostic tradition, the idea is that our divine self, which in Gnostic tradition is just like LDS early tradition, we are divine, we are the divine offspring of God. And our task here in this world is to discover that and remember that we are divine, and to return and to ascend back to our true nature in the realms of light. And so in Gnostic traditions, Sophia represents the part of our divinity that experiences itself as here in our body, so far away from God, here in the world. And the idea of the logos aspect, of ourself is that part of our spirit that is still there, that has never left. It's like the highest dimensional part of ourself, the source of our spirit, that it's always been there. It's still there with God, and that we exist on these different dimensions. So it's kind of a complex theological idea, but I like it because it brings in this idea that Mary and Mary Magdalene as well, and we all, in a way, we're all an embodiment of the Sophia aspect of the divine, because the Sophia is the aspect of the divine that descends into the world and tarries and labors here and forgets who she is, and then has to remember who she is. And then when she remembers who she is, she ascends and goes back and becomes joined with her logos aspect, the masculine aspect that was always there, that stayed there and was always reaching out to her to help her remember who she was. And it's just a beautiful myth. I love that Gnostic myth of Logos and Sophia as two dimensions of our own divinity. So I really like the idea of Sophia is this divinity within us, our soul within us, calling us back to our source, to God, and to our higher, our higher aspect, the source of our own being. And I think Joseph Smith amazingly revealed this and understood this in a way. And so when we meditate and we use these holy days as a way of entering into the mystery and into the story of Mary and Jesus, who oftentimes are seen as the human embodiment of the Sophia and the Logos. Logos as Jesus and Sophia as Mary, like you see in the Gospel of John, where it talks about the Logos. It gives us a way to enter into our spiritual identity, our spiritual self, you know, to try to meditate and connect with that womb of light of our divine spirit that lives within our body, inside of us, and its connection to God and to the source. The source of our being is uncreated, it's indestructible. On some level, it's always there with God, it's never left. And yet we perceive ourselves as so far away from God here in this world that's so hard. But the holy days and the myth and the story and the images of Mary and Jesus and Sophia and Logos offer us an opportunity to enter into that innermost spiritual identity, who we are as a soul or spiritual being, not just a human being, and connect with that, and go in and try to draw out what's in there that's kicking and dying to get out at Christmas. And so this is a picture of Sophia beckoning us. She's beckoning us to enter into the womb within our own soul, the sacred room of light inside of ourselves, or the Sophia aspect of ourselves, if you want to call it that. Do you want to read this little
Yes, absolutely.
prayer?
It's beautiful. It says, O light, which is in thee and is with me, excellent mystery, light eternal, arise and seek my power and the soul in me.
Beautiful. Thank you. And here's this is I forgot about this one. So at this time, as we approach Christmas, as we go through this last 2 weeks of Advent as the time of pregnancy and preparation, think about the birth of Christ within yourself. How can you bring forth the divine within you? Christmas is the birth of divine light, eternal, uncreated, indestructible, coming forth at the darkest time. How will it be born this year in you? In other words, how will you give birth to Christ, the light of Christ within you? If you think about Mary as you, what will you give birth to this Christmas? And if you think about Jesus as you, how are you being born? How are you bringing forth the light of Christ within you this year? A new aspect of it, a new, bigger part of it, maybe than you've ever brought forth before. And do you want to read this last scriptural text?
Yes.
The Corinthians, yeah.
Know you not that you are God's temple and God's Spirit dwells in you? God's temple is holy, and that temple you are.
I love that.
Yeah, I just love this idea, this concept, this reframing of the Christmas season, of thinking about what is the divine waiting to be born in us? What is the divine waiting to be manifested, seen, and felt once it is born,
Yeah.
And how can we move past those shadows within ourselves and work through those shadows to allow that to be born and to be vulnerable enough to then let it be witnessed and felt by the world as well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I hope that this will inspire listeners to think about these other readings, the Marian, centering Mary and Christmas, and centering yourself in the story. And by saying all of this, I am not suggesting that we neglect the role of the Christ child. The Christ child, the story, the birth is so beautiful and so inspiring, that the divine that God sends the divine light into the world at the darkest time to help humanity at the darkest time. That story is so sacred. These readings just add additional dimensions to it to help us, I think, enter the story more powerfully and personally, to really, I think, appreciate Christmas. I want people, as a liturgist, I want people to appreciate Christmas and the seasons even more than they do.
Yeah, and I think it also helps provide an opportunity to allow it to change us more fully, to not just experience and celebrate this historical, event that took place and what that means, but also every year and every Advent and every, during that same season every year, to take the time to allow it to even more deeply change us and connect us to the divine above and within ourselves. That logos, right? Is it logos and Sophia?
Yeah.
The God in kind of the heavens that is maybe feels a little more separate, and the God, the divine within ourselves, that's Sophia.
Yeah, exactly. Like two different levels, two different dimensional levels of the divine that is you, because we exist on more than three dimensions. This is what spirituality and religion and mysticism are all about. If we only existed on three dimensions, we wouldn't have a spiritual self. We wouldn't have a higher self. We exist on more dimensions. And so there are higher dimensions of our spirit than what we're aware of here in our mortal being. And it's something to think about. Thanks for facilitating this conversation. I just hope it really inspires people to get more out of Christmas season.
Yeah. And I think it might start with me creating little midwives for all of my nativity scenes to remind me. Yeah, but then ultimately, truly, I just hope that all of us, me included, can take the time that you talk about to meditate, to allow it to be more impactful, to change us, and that requires work, that requires time, that requires sitting and questioning and thinking and feeling. And I hope that we all can make the time to do that. And because as we do that, I know that our time is pulled so many different directions this time of year. But that is something, what greater effort could you put your time toward? What greater work could you do at this time than to allow it to connect you more fully to who you are and to who you are meant to be, and to the divine above and the divine within us, and have the courage to bring that forth in even greater fullness.
Yeah. That was beautiful. I could add nothing to that.
Well, I don't know about that. You always have so much to add. We just need to do more and more podcasts with you.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for letting me share this. I have years of liturgical work that I really want to share and get out there in some form that I haven't published. And I think I want to do workshops for each holy season and all the holy days. So we'll see. But thank you for
if anyone has skills when it comes to website management and knowing how to create a place where Maxine could put all those things and wants to help with that, you should reach out.
I will do that. I need that.
Yeah, anybody reach out to her, reach out to us. We can connect you because she has a lot to give, but yes, totally. Well, Maxine, if there is someone who's wanting to reach out to you and maybe dig even more deeply into this conversation or reach out in some other way, what is the best way for them to contact you, to be able to connect?
That's a good question. You can find me on Instagram. It's Mormon Feminisms, plural. I think it just says M. Hanks. Mormon Feminisms on Instagram. But I'm on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook, Maxine Hanks 3. Apparently there are two others before me. I kind of like being the third, though. I like the number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm trying to do a YouTube page. I've set up a YouTube page. I have nothing on it. And I have a whole bunch of followers already. So
Amazing.
I need to put some content on there.
Everyone's just waiting with bated breath for whatever you're going to put on there.
Old tech idiot Maxine can't figure out how to upload anything. I was all excited to upload stuff, and then I found out that it wouldn't let me use all these podcasts that I'd done. It would only let me upload my own material, and I thought, oh my gosh, Anyway, so I hope to get the YouTube thing going, and I don't have a website. I've never had a website. I hope to get a website going, but you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. That's it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Maxine. We appreciate you so much and are grateful for all of the light that you have birthed and brought into this world. And I hope that, this has been an opportunity for us to see that and to witness it and perhaps feel of it as well, just as in Epiphany and Candlemas. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Jessica. I love In Her Image podcast. I'm always willing to come on to this podcast anytime. So thank you.
Wonderful. And Merry Christmas to all.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Mary. Merry Christmas.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy this podcast, we invite you to come on over to patreon.com/inherimagepodcast for more content and community. We're so excited to meet you.